Please, unload these at once. Freddie had told Colin to wait for him, but Colin didn't want Freddie to get into trouble. Yes, sir. Then Mr. Percival went to look for Freddie. Soon, Freddie puffed up to Colin. I waited for you, but Mr. Percival told me to finish the job. It's all done now. He was very pleased. Freddie looked down at the canal. He wasn't pleased at all. The lights, presents, and the tree were floating away on a barge. The children would soon arrive at Mr. Percival's house, and there was nothing there for the party. And there was nothing at the wharf either. Now no one will have a party, Freddie huffed to himself. And I still haven't found Mr. Percival. He felt terrible. I must stop the barge. Then Freddie saw Mr. Percival. He knew what he had to do. Freddie chuffed over to see Mr. Percival. Where have you been? Freddie told him all about his idea to have the party at the wharf. It was a surprise for Colin, sir. Colin has never been to a party. Mr. Percival thought having the party at the wharf was a very good idea. But you should have asked me first. Oh, yes, sir. If I work quickly, I can still put everything right. All right, Freddie, but hurry now. Freddie raced to catch up with the barge. He called out to the bargeman. Stop! Please turn around and go back to Colin. All right, Freddie. Freddie steamed back to Colin. He told Colin all about the party. I wanted to have a surprise party for you. For me? Colin was delighted and surprised. Soon, Colin was unloading everything for the party. Now, Freddie felt very happy. He steamed away to Mr. Percival's house. Freddie whistled to the children. The party is now at the wharf. And they whooshed away. All the other engines were waiting at the wharf, even Thomas. Presents were piled high. The tree was covered in lights. And so was Colin. What a wonderful party! Thank you, Freddie! Freddie was delighted. All the engines whistled and tooted. The children cheered and cheered. It was their best winter holiday party ever. With a crash and a bang, Thomas and Diesel smashed Harry and Bert right through the back of the engine sheds. Stones and timber flew everywhere. Bust my buffers. Uh-oh! Then Henry arrived. I've come to collect my train. Your train isn't ready. Then the yard manager arrived. Thomas, you have pushed Mavis off the rails, and Harry and Bert through the back of the engine shed. Thomas felt worse than ever. Oh no, it's all my fault. I should have done my job and not raced against Diesel. Come on, let's have one more race. No, Diesel, I have an important job to do. Thomas puffed over to Henry. I'll fill your cars as fast as I can. Your train will soon be ready. And Thomas chuffed quickly away. Thomas felt terrible. I must work very hard to put everything right, he thought to himself. Thomas shunted the cars under the hut. Soon they were all filled. And Henry huffed happily away with his train. Then Thomas collected Rocky. Rocky lowered Mavis back onto the tracks. I'm sorry I bashed you. I was trying to win a race. Mavis was relieved to be back on the track. Next, Thomas shunted Rocky over to the sheds. Harry and Bert were soon back on the rails. I'm sorry I biffed you. I should have done my job instead of trying to be the fastest. Then Diesel rolled in. We must clear all the cars of broken stones.
Yeah, sure, Thomas.
At last, the freight cars were loaded with broken rubble from the sheds. So together, Thomas and Diesel shunted the freight cars as quickly as they could. Finally, all the jobs were done.
We still don't know who's the fastest. Let's have another race.
All right, but this time we must go forwards. So the two engines raced away to the quarry gates. And they both arrived together. Statue of Proteus. Peter Sam was coupled up to the flatbed. Peter Sam pumped his pistons. The cream churns were heavy, but the Proteus statue was even heavier. Peter Sam puffed and puffed to the top of the hill. Now I can roll down the other side, he thought. Peter Sam raced down the hill. There was a junction ahead. Oh no, this load is too heavy. Help! Peter Sam smashed into a buffer. The cream churns crashed. The junction was blocked. Bubbling boilers! I'll never be the star of the show now. The other engines can't get through. I've spoiled everything for everyone. Then Peter Sam heard the whistles of his friends. Duncan, Freddie, and Mighty Mac arrived at the junction. They were surprised at the mess. Peter Sam felt very silly. I'm sorry. I wanted to be the star of Miss Marvel's show. He told them about finding the statue of Proteus. The engines gasped. The statue belongs to us all. Please, will you help me take it to the show? His friends were happy to help. Duncan chuffed away to find a mechanic for Peter Sam. Mighty Mac puffed to tell Mr. Percival about the statue. Freddie, will you take Proteus to the show? Freddie was delighted. It would be an honor. Soon the mechanic fixed Peter Sam's brakes. Now you're ready to go, Peter Sam. Later, Peter Sam collected fresh cream from the farm. I know Miss Marvel's show has started, but all the other engines will be there to enjoy the statue. Peter Sam chuffed his long way back. Peter Sam puffed up quietly. Miss Marvel was finishing her last story. Oh my! The statue is still covered. Today, one of our engines found something very special. So this is for all the little engines of the hills, because you are all special. Everyone gasped at the wonderful statue. The engines whistled. Peter Sam smiled. We are all stars of the show. James huffed and puffed. He steamed and strained. His face was now as red as his boiler. James arrived at the top of the hill. He was very pleased. Now I can puff fast down the other side, he thought. Then there was trouble. Hector could see a snowslide had blocked the line. Hector knew that if James slowed down at the bottom, they would get stuck in the drift. Onwards, onwards! Don't slow down, James! But James didn't want to be told what to do, especially by a freight car. I'll decide what we do, he huffed to himself. so James applied his brakes. The train smashed into the snow, and it stuck. James couldn't make his delivery. He felt very bad.
James is silly. James is slow. James has got us stuck in the snow.
James wished he had checked with the yard manager about the weather. He wished he hadn't tried to find his way through Shen Valley. And he wished he had asked Edward to be his front engine. Now I know Hector was trying to help me. The freight cars giggled. Quiet! Please, Hector. How can I deliver my train on time? Hector was happy to help.
I'm a very heavy freight car. We must race down the hill at full speed.
Then we will biff the train right through the snow. What a good idea. So Hector was uncoupled from the train. James wheeshed and wheeshed. At last, he had hauled Hector back to the top of the hill. Okay, James, go! Hector and James raced faster and faster down the hill. There was a mighty biff, and Hector pushed the train right through the snow. We did it, Hector! Well done! Hector was pleased. Stanley and Thomas were already at Great Waterton. James, Hector, and the train arrived. You made it!
We were worried.
I wasn't worried. Hector helped me all the way. Stanley and Thomas looked surprised. You can always rely on a good freight car. Hector was happy to have helped, and James was happy to have a new friend. I'm not the man in the hills. I'm the miller. Thomas could see the miller was no longer white. All the flour had blown off him. Thomas was upset. The miller was worried. I still have to make the birthday cake for the party. And I have to make the ice cream. The little engines were cross. You said you'd bring the best present of all. Now Mr. Percival doesn't have any presents, and we're all late. Thomas felt terrible. I wanted to find the most special present all on my own, but all I've done is spoil the party for everyone, especially for Mr. Percival. So Thomas asked Scarloe and Rheneas to take the party tent. Please, hurry. The dairyman and the miller boarded Thomas, and Thomas raced quickly away. Thomas was determined to put everything right. Thomas delivered the dairyman to the dairy to make the ice cream. And he delivered the miller to the mill. At last, the cake was baked, and Thomas chuffed quickly away with it. Thomas met Freddie at a junction. Freddie was on his way to the party. I have to get the birthday cake to the party as quickly as I can. Please, help me find the shortcut. Freddie was happy to help. Come on now, follow me. And together they puffed quickly away. Thomas and Freddie stopped at the Green Hills Junction. Suddenly, Thomas gasped. Bust my boiler! Look! There, all in white, was a man. He was carved into the hillside. He shone in the moonlight. It's the man in the hills! Thomas, you found him! Suddenly, Thomas had an idea. Freddie, please bring Mr. Percival here with all the engines. And Freddie raced away. Soon, all the engines were gathered by the man in the hills. The engines gasped, and everyone was delighted. There, far away and high up in the high hills, Sir Handel was ready to tell his story. And Mr. Percival had the best birthday present ever. From all of the... Slowly, Stanley pulled Thomas back to safety. Thomas was upset. How did I lose the blocks? He huffed to himself. Thomas remembered the bump on the bridge. It had made the last block fall from his flatbed. Maybe the other blocks fell when I hit the other bumps, he thought. Thomas remembered where he had hit the buffers. Then he remembered going over the very bumpy track. Thomas knew what he had to do. Stanley, will you help me, please? Of course, Thomas. If you shunt me back along the track to the yard, I can show you where the other special blocks fell off. That's a very good idea. We must take Rocky with us. He can load the blocks onto your flatbed. Then you can bring them back to finish the bridge. Soon, Stanley was chuffing along. He shunted Thomas behind him. And Murdoch shunted Rocky. They reached the bottom of the steep hill. This is where I bashed the buffers with a bump. Hooray! There they are! Soon, Rocky had lifted the blocks onto Stanley's flatbed, and they all puffed on. Thomas and Stanley found the rest of the special blocks at the sharp bend, and Rocky set to work. Soon, Stanley shunted Thomas back into the yard, and he set off proudly with the special blocks. Good luck, Stanley! I was silly not to have asked for your help. Thank you! A worker looked at Thomas's wheels. I've come to have my brakes fixed. They make a terrible squeak. Later that day, Thomas chuffed back to the Sodor River Bridge. Thomas put his brakes on. There was no squeak at all. He stopped right beside Stanley. My brakes are fixed now. And so is the Sodor River Bridge. All thanks to my friend, Stanley. Gordon pulled up to the tunnel. He could see steam.
Who's hiding in there? Express coming through! Come on out!
James didn't want to come out. He was sure Gordon would laugh at him. Then Thomas and Percy puffed up.
What's happening? Who's in there?
I don't know, but the Express can't wait.
James knew the engines were waiting for him, and so were the children.
If I keep hiding, I'll be late to pick up the children, and they'll be late for their party.
So, with a puff and a huff, James chuffed slowly out of the tunnel. He was very unhappy.
James, you're all pink. What a funny color.
I'd hide too if I was bright pink.
James felt terrible. All the engines were laughing, but James knew what he had to do.
I feel very silly, but I can't let the children down.
James hurried to Maithwaite as fast as his pistons could pump. James saw Spencer at a junction. Spencer thought James looked very silly.
Oh dear, James. Bright pink really isn't your color.
James didn't like this, but this time, even though he felt silly, he didn't hide.
I mustn't be late for the children.
Then James saw Henry passing by.
My word, you do look pink!
But James didn't hide. He felt silly, but he didn't stop.
Must collect the children. Must collect the children.
James puffed towards Maithwaite. He could see the children waiting.
I'm sure the children will laugh too. They will think I look very silly.
And he steamed sadly on to the station. James pulled into Maithwaite. Sir Topham Hatt's granddaughter didn't laugh. And she didn't think James looked silly at all. She smiled. She was very excited and very happy.
James, you're a pink engine. Pink is my favorite color.
James couldn't believe it.
Do you really like pink?
I love pink, and so do all my friends. Look! Pink is our favorite color!
James was so happy it made his boiler bubble.
I'm a very lucky engine!
James puffed proudly into the town hall, just in time for the party. The children laughed and clapped their hands. James, the bright pink engine, was the hero of the... But Thomas was too worried about his funny funnel to notice. He raced on towards Knapford. At last, Thomas puffed into Knapford, just as Sir Topham Hatt and Mr. Bubbles arrived. Sir Topham Hatt was very cross.
Thomas, you were going much too fast. The special bubble liquid splished and splashed out of the tank.
And now the tank is empty. And it's almost time for my show to start. The children will be very disappointed. Thomas felt terrible.
I'm sorry, sir.
The only special bubble liquid left is at Brendam Docks. Now, there isn't time to pick it up before the show.
Yes, there is. I'm sure I can puff to Brendan and back in time for your show.
Very well, Thomas. But this time, you must be careful.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
And Thomas chuffed quickly away. Soon, Thomas arrived back at Brendam Docks. A new tank of bubble liquid was loaded onto his flatbed, and Thomas puffed carefully away. Thomas saw Edward at a crossing.
Hello, Thomas. That's a funny funnel.
Thomas didn't like Edward laughing at his funny funnel. But this time, Thomas didn't pump his pistons and race away from Edward as quickly as he could. He chuffed carefully on to Knapford. Then, Thomas puffed past some children. The children saw his funny funnel. They were excited. They thought Thomas was going to be part of Mr. Bubble's show. Thomas was surprised. He gave the children an extra loud toot. The children laughed even more. Thomas liked to see the children laughing.
They're laughing at my funny funnel. It makes them happy.
And that made Thomas happy. Thomas steamed back into Knapford. The children cheered. Well done, Thomas. You haven't spilled one drop of my special bubble liquid, and you're just in time for my show. Later, the children clapped and cheered at the Mr. Bubbles Clown Show. They had never seen such big bubbles. Then the children spotted that Thomas's funny funnel looked just like Mr. Bubbles' hat. Thank you, Thomas. The funniest engine on Sodor. Soon, everyone was laughing, and Thomas most of all. Diesel would see the photographer, and he would find out about the new photograph. So Thomas wished lots of steam. It billowed from his boiler and filled the whole station. So Diesel didn't see the photographer, and he trundled straight by. The steam has made my camera wet. I'm sorry, sir. We'll have to wait for it to dry. Tell the engines to come back later to Tidmouth. So all the engines came back later, instead of doing their jobs. At last, the photographer was ready. No one had noticed Diesel wasn't there. Thomas was very relieved. But just then, Diesel oiled round the bend. Diesel was surprised to see all the engines. He screeched to a halt. Rolls of bunting went everywhere.
No one told me there was another photograph.
But I asked Thomas to tell everyone. All the engines looked at Thomas. Thomas felt terrible. Sir Topham Hatt was very cross.
Gordon, you were meant to pick up Mr. Giggles, the famous clown. Emily, you were meant to pick up the brass band. And James, you were meant to pick up the bunting and decorations. None of you arrived, so Diesel had to do all your jobs. And now he's late to do his own work.
Thomas was very upset. It's all my fault, sir. I didn't want Diesel to know about the new photograph. In the last one, he moved right in front of me, on purpose.
I did not. The photographer told me to move.
I did. Perhaps you rolled too far. Thomas knew then he'd made a mistake. I'm sorry, Diesel. I was wrong to think you did it on purpose. And I'm very sorry for causing all this trouble, sir. Soon all the engines were lined up. The new photograph was taken. Sir, if I do all Diesel's jobs, can he collect the new billboard?
That's a wonderful idea, Thomas.
Diesel agreed. For the rest of the day, Thomas worked hard. He did all Diesel's jobs. And Diesel picked up the new billboard just in time for the celebrations. It was a wonderful party. There were clowns and a brass band. Diesel and Thomas agreed that the new billboard was the best billboard they'd ever seen. Still there. Toby mustn't see Flora. Flora, we are late to pick up my load. We must go to the docks. If you say so, Thomas. And they puffed quickly away. At the docks, Thomas was coupled up to his large load to take to Great Waterton. Thomas was sure Toby would now be leading the parade. Come on, Flora. Flora's axles ached, but Thomas steamed stronger. Thomas and Flora puffed up to the junction. Then there was trouble. Flora had chuffed too far. She had run out of coal. I'm sorry, Thomas. Flora's wheels wobbled weakly. Thomas felt bad. He knew it was his fault. Then he heard a chuff, and a puff, and a ring of a bell. It was Toby. Thomas, I've been waiting for you.
Who's that?
Cinders and ashes. Toby had met Flora. Neither of them was at the parade. Thomas couldn't have felt worse. Sir Topham Hatt would be very cross. Flora, this is Toby. Toby, this is Flora. Toby looked very happy. Thomas was surprised.
I wanted to tell you, Thomas, that I was too scared to lead the parade by myself. But now, Flora and I can lead it together.
I thought I knew what you wanted, Toby, but I was wrong. Now Thomas had to quickly put right his mistake. Flora, take my coal. I'll pick up more. Puff as fast as you can to Great Waterton. Toby and Flora soon puffed away. Later, Thomas chuffed into Great Waterton. The parade was ready to leave. Thomas's flatbed was uncovered. Flora gasped. She had a wonderful new tram car. Toby was pleased. Thomas watched his two friends lead the first Great Waterton Parade. The children cheered. The brass band boomed. Now I have another best friend, and she is a steam tram too. And Thomas smiled his happiest smile.